Alors, ma motion.
So my motion?
Oui.
Non, on retourne à vous. Là.
Madame Posé, we're coming back to you. It's very simple, nothing revolutionary, but I'm ready to write a letter to the minister, to the two ministers related to our study on sustainable finance. So what I'm proposing is, given that you told me that the analysts could not make a draft report for December 16th, and that was going to be delayed. So I said, well, let's right away do a letter. And Mr. Mitchell talked about a letter and the report. So I was inspired to do that. So I'll read it to you slowly. That the committee send a letter addressed to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and the Minister of Finance to inform them that as part of the study on the climate and environmental impacts related to the Canadian financial system, the committee is making the following priority recommendations. We agree that for us, these are priority recommendations. When the report will be studied after the holidays, there'll be other recommendations. So the first is, just to make sure that I'm clear about this, if we adopt this motion, these become recommendations in the future committee report on funding and the effect of climate change. Yes, there are 4, but there will certainly be more. Okay, that's good. So, reforming Canada's financial system to align with climate commitments as set out in Bill S-243, the Climate Aligned Finance Act, which would itself provide a robust, science-based regulatory framework for conducting transition plans and annual progress reports, and address greenwashing concerns around climate action. So we know there were several people who spoke about this important bill, which has been studied for a very long time at the Senate. And so it was obvious to speak about it again. Secondly, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions is reconsidering the interpretation of its mandate, as suggested by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, and is issuing detailed guidance on transition plans. The second recommendation is based on what the Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development had proposed. Recommendation 3, managers of federally regulated public pension funds, in particular the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board and the Public Sector Pension Investment Board, be required to fully disclose their investments in private equity funds. There again, several witnesses came to tell us that it wasn't just banks, but also public funds, public pension funds, and that a working group on sustainable financing will be created to fight against greenwashing. Several people spoke to us about that. So it would be a letter that would request both ministers, so the Minister of the Environment and the Minister of Finance, a response within 45 days about what the ministries had already undertaken, because we were told that they were already starting to do work, and what they intend to put in place for each of the previous recommendations. And this letter does not include the report that will have to be considered as soon as the House returns, that is, during committee's meetings during week of January 27th. Can I bring a clarification or a suggestion here? I think we did talk about it a few weeks ago, so that we can have a draft report that has the content, as usual, in our reports. In addition to having recommendations, there's the text. When I was speaking to the analysts, they said that it could be ready for February 12th, the first draft of the report. So I have difficulty seeing how on January 27th we'd be ready to discuss the first draft of the report during that week. I was assured that we'd be able to discuss a draft report on February 12th. Is that right? Yes. So could you maybe have a friendly amendment just to accommodate the analysts? We could say this letter does not include the report that will have to be considered as soon as the House returns, which should be the object of study on February 12th. The study should begin on February 12th. Well, actually, this does two things at once. It says in the calendar that we will be starting our study of the first draft of the report. Perfect. So that's a friendly amendment.
For the friendly amendments and
No, I'm not offering, Madam. Well, listen. The thing is, I think, Madame Posé, est-ce que vous pourriez suggérer?
Ms. Posé, could you mention your friendly amendment? Because what I wanted to do is inform the committee of a certain situation. We cannot have the first draft before the 12th. So could you propose a friendly amendment to change that to the 12th? But it can't be me. Would Mr. Benton, would you ask for it?
Clerk, but I think process-wise, I would be pleased to put that out as a friendly amendment, if Madame Posé would accept February 12th.
Yes, she accepts. She's already accepted it when I proposed it, but it's apparently not it's
No,
not
of course
in good form. But I apologize. I was just trying to clarify the point and keep us moving. Okay, allez-y, Madame Posé.
Allez-y.
Vous avez...
Go ahead, Ms. Posé. Have you finished? So we pass the floor to Mr. Leslie.
The list. Madame Posé.
Ms. Posé presented her motion, and she mentioned the rationale. So on the list, I had Mr. Leslie. Well, I hope I'm not intruding on confidentiality. Was the list created a few minutes ago? No, it was created before the motion for in camera.
Je sais pas. Un point intéressant. OK.
It's an interesting point. So we'll start back at zero. So I'll ask the clerk what we do in this case. It's the first time because it's delicate because we don't want to say it. I understand. So we'll have a short break.
Good point to make. So we can only go with that part of the list that was established after we left the in-camera portion. So that means, Mr. Leslie, you're not on the list. Mr. Van Couverton did ask to be on the list. So he's on the list. So we start with Mr. Mazier.
That was the original, so I'm like Mr. Leslie.
Is this
Mr.
all
Leslie, no, I can't talk about Mr. Leslie because it was all in camera. So you're next.
So is this is this motion moved or just tabled?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's
So we go to Mr. Mazier, then Ms. Taylor-Roy, then Madame Châtel, Mr. Longfield, Mr. Van Couverton, Mr. Deltel, Mr. Okay, we'll put Mr. Leslie on after Mr. Deltel.
Mr. Chair, I also have my hand up. Just a point of clarification. This list that you just read out, was that taken in the break while we were,
No, it was after when we came back.
once we came back?
Yeah. So, but now you're on it.
Right.
So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Deltel, for that lawyerly intervention. I appreciate it. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mazier.
I thought it was Mr. Deltel, actually, that was going to be speaking, so I have nothing. Sorry.
Okay.
Can I switch over to Mr. Deltel because of the confusion?
No, we'll go to Madame Taylor Roy. Do you want to get on the list later? Okay. Ms. Taylor Roy, Madame Chatel, Mr. Longfield, Mr. Van Couverden, Mr. Deltel, Mr. Leslie, Ms. Collins.
Mr. Chair, was that really that far down the list?
Well, it's very complicated,
Okay.
but that's
Okay,
that's the way it is. I'll explain maybe later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleague, Ms. Posey, for putting forward this motion. I think it's a very good idea to be doing this. We've worked on this study for quite a while now, and the time frame to have this done was yesterday or last year, getting our sustainable finance legislation in place. The Climate Aligned Finance Act is already there. We have some good legislation, and I think we need to move more quickly. Unfortunately, we've had a number of delays in this committee over the course of this study, which have caused us not to move as quickly as we would have liked in getting this study completed and the report completed. But I think, and some of them have been necessary, like our study on the Jasper fire, of course, but I do believe that sending a letter to the ministers would help to expedite some of the things that need to be undertaken and at least have them considered by the bodies. So with regards to OSFI, I think since they're in the middle of reconsidering it and they can start looking at what they should be doing to align it, I think we should definitely have that recommendation there. I think we've talked a lot about the Climate Aligned Finance Act in this committee, and we need to have that science-based regulatory framework in place. So I think that asking to have these particular recommendations in place, also the federally regulated public pension funds, the CPPIB and Public Sector Pension Investment Board, having them disclose their investments starting as soon as possible would be very important. And I just note what's happening in Alberta with their pension fund right now and the kind of move towards less transparency and a very bizarre way of running a pension plan. And I think that the example perhaps set by the federal government in the pension plans that we do regulate would be good for other pension plans across Canada. So and the working group, I think, in the Competition Bureau is also an excellent idea, Madame Posey. I think that we need to do what we can to combat greenwashing in the financial sector and as well as we have in the real economy. So for all those reasons, I would say that we should do this. I think there could be more in this letter, but given that the report will be going forward in January and we can supplement it with other recommendations, I think these are some of the key ones that we should put in place and put forward. So, I would just thank you for this. I think that, sustainable finance is something that we have not moved quickly enough on. The taxonomy is very important. Disclosures are important, obviously. And I do believe that the sooner we can get these in place, the better. I mean, we had unprecedented cross-party support for climate-aligned financial regulation in 2023, Motion 84. So we already know that we are all behind this, that we want our financial sector to be in support of the real sector when it comes to meeting our environmental goals. And I think that the more we can do to expedite that, and I know our analysts will do an amazing job and have working on the full report that will be forthcoming, and we will certainly add other recommendations to this. But I think this is something that should be done, especially in light of perhaps the feds coming forward. If we are able to actually do some real work in the House of Commons, if the Conservatives allow us to actually move on from debating a privilege motion that we've already agreed to, but that they've changed the terms of now, so that we can get to some of the other work we have to do, it would be helpful. But in the absence of that, we don't know when a FES will be coming forward. So I think having other things like this go directly to the Environment Minister is important, and to try and get some of this work started. And I think that, the Bill S-243 that Senator Galvez put forward has a lot of good material in it. And I think referencing that and trying to move forward on some of those issues is also important. You know, we have a climate emergency. We have Canadians across the country who are concerned about the level of pollution that is continuing. And with the level of investment that is being made from our financial institutions and our pensions into the oil and gas sector for new production, not investments that would actually reduce emissions, as they like to say they want to do, but for new production which actually increases emissions. You know, with the oil and gas sector in Canada only right now contributing, I think, less than 6% to our GDP. A lot of our oil and gas industry is foreign-owned, and they are contributing over 31% to greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. It's the only sector that has not contributed to the decrease we've seen in our emissions over the last while. And I think that the sooner that we can get the financial sector online to actually understand and the public to understand what these investments are, whether these investments are actually investments that are helping us meet our climate goals, or whether they're investments that are transitioning us to our environment goals, or whether these are investments that are doing nothing or hurting us when it comes to our climate goals. I think all Canadians should have that information, and I know certainly for me, when I look at investments or I look at companies, that is something that I think about, and I know many of my constituents in Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill also look at that information and have found it difficult in the past to ascertain, in fact, where the investments are being made and whether a fund that says it's green is actually green. So I think this is an excellent motion you've put forward, and thank you for doing the work on this, and I will certainly be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bill.
Président, merci à Madame Posé.
Thank you to Ms. Posé. I think Ms. Posé is very aware of our funding for sustainable funding, so I was very happy about the motion for the study that I am awaiting very eagerly. I'll take a few minutes to mention anyway for your information, because I prefer that we pay attention to this early, as early as possible, rather than waiting for the report. So I agree with this initiative, but I would like to share with my colleagues a few points. There were some major announcements in October on sustainable finance by the government. So we finally have a taxonomy, a pathway to taxonomy that's aligned with science, which was very important to announce regulations on the disclosure by large businesses, federal businesses. This is very important. There are several aspects of the recommendations in that letter that are aligned with the government initiatives of October. For example, reinforcing transparency, accountability, and efficiency of the financial system in order to support transition to a net zero economy. There's also the taxonomy will be very helpful in the fight against greenwashing, because when we have a taxonomy that's based on science, we can expect that it be well implemented. There are differences and potential tensions between our recommendations and the possible actions of the government that are aligned on the October announcements on taxonomy and disclosure. First of all, I think that what Madame Posé is suggesting in terms of transparency and accountability, the government, it wants to amend the Canadian, the Act on Canadian companies with shares in terms of climate action. What the committee's recommended is greater transparency in terms of pension funds and climate transition plans. So there are initiatives that would also strengthen the government's proposal. In terms of the Canadian government, I said the creation of voluntary guidelines for green investments and transition investments wants to have clear definitions that would reduce the resist of greenwashing. So that's compatible with or consistent with the committee recommendation to have a rigorous taxonomy, and also in terms of the use of private capitals, because we wish to encourage the private sector to align its investment on climate goals by focusing on a green and sustainable transition. There's also another step to align with our committee's objectives. So I'm starting with what's aligned, what's good, but there are some eventual divergences. The government wants to have voluntary initiatives on the taxonomy, whereas it wants to recommend rigorous definitions. So there's a difference that could create a confusion in the expectations of the various parties. So I don't have a proposal to make, but I want it to be acknowledged that there is a certain distinction in that level. The government has not mentioned an explicit review of the role of the Office of Superintendents of Financial Institutions, whereas the committee is recommending an enlarged mandate to take into account transitional objectives and green initiatives. And another thing, in terms of public funds, I think that recent developments in October did not invoke specific measures in terms of investments of public pension funds, as the Canada Pension Plans, CPPIB, which seems to be a priority for Ms. Posé, so there's some divergence. And there's also the legal framework of amendments proposed by the Act on the Canadian Act on corporations. So we would like, the government would like a more rigorous framework. So I think there's a difference there. So we're moving with more constraints in finance. So I don't necessarily have any amendments to or modifications to propose. However, I think that in the context of our report in February, and I'm looking at the analysts who are always excellent, thank you. In that report, I think it's important to emphasize that there are several actions now. There's Senator Rosa Galvez bill, which is excellent, but which is different from the announcements in October. And we also have with the letter of this committee, that's the potential letter proposing different actions. So I think we have an aligned approach, a solid approach that will lead to the maximum of investment in Canada in our 21st century economy. Thank you. Madame Châtel.
First of all, thank you to Madame Posé. This was a very creative way of bringing the will of the committee into the public eye. We have had, of course, testimonies that would reinforce these recommendations. I was also thinking of our analysts and thinking, normally what we do is we look at a report and we base our recommendations on the background that the analysts include in our report. We're kind of going at a little different route, but I think it's also very consistent with what we've heard. And I don't think there would be any problems having a report align with these recommendations, as we did hear them over and over, in particular getting S243 completed. When Parliament gets hung up, we do need to find other ways of getting our signals to the market. And I think having this discussed at committee in an open forum, and thank you for bringing it into open forum instead of in camera, I think having our comments either in support or not of these recommendations, I support every one of them. I think that's important. We do have a Sustainable Finance Forum coming up November 28th and 29th that's put on by MP Turnbull. And I know there's about 1,000 people in that room that would be very interested to know what signals are coming out of the Environment and Sustainability Committee. So getting this out there before the middle of February is a brilliant move, I think. So I think it's something that's a little unusual, but given the delays that we're seeing in Parliament and the other delays we see in committees, I think it's important, given the urgency of first of all, the climate emergency that we're in, but also that sustainable finance is a topic that we have had extra government committee look at. They've also been saying, we did all this work 2 years ago. We'd like to see what the government is thinking. This gives us a chance to express that. And I know some of the people personally that worked internationally on this would be very interested to see that our comments are in alignment with their comments. So it's a great way of putting a signal to the market. I commend Madame Posey for her creativity. I haven't seen this before, but committees can be creative. And I think that's good news for Canadians, that we can find ways to work together on important issues like the climate crisis that we're in. So I'm fully in support of these 4 recommendations. As Madame Posey said, there will be others that will come from our study, which was an extensive study. There will be some things likely, well, I won't start picking at it because we don't have it in front of us, but once we see the study, there were some very key elements to that study that I would like to see some recommendations on. But we're not studying the study, we're actually studying this as a letter, and so I would love to put my support behind this, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield, Mr. Van Koeverden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Je veux vraiment remercier mon...
I really want to thank my colleague and friend, Ms. Posey, to have given the committee this opportunity to discuss this important issue.
With respect to Senator Galvez's bill, it's a great bill, and she's an extraordinary senator with a ton of public sector and academic experience in this area. So I'm very enthusiastic about the chance to not just highlight her work, but also demonstrate that there is potentially a consensus on this committee with respect to aligning the Canadian finance sector with science and with our climate commitments. I was reading, just as we were on break today, reading some of Senator Galvez's, some of her credentials. She has a PhD in environmental engineering from McGill, and she was a professor at the University de Laval for 25 years, and she specializes in water and soil contamination, waste management and residues, sustainable development, environmental impact assessments, and climate risk due to infrastructure, or climate risk to infrastructure. Suffice to say, she would have been a fine committee witness at many points in the last couple of weeks, months, or over a year, as we were studying both water, climate-aligned finance, and various other challenges that we've been confronted with. So I'm very much in support of this letter. I do think it's creative and potentially unorthodox, but I think that's great. We have heard from a ton of witnesses on our climate-aligned finance. And of course, we do have the summit coming up, thanks to MP Turnbull. And I think this is a great way to demonstrate that the committee's been working on it. So fully support it.
Thank you, Mr. Van Koeverden. Monsieur Deltel.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I would like to congratulate Mr. Van Koeverden for the quality of his French. Every time he has the opportunity to thank someone in French, he does it. He did it in the House last week. He does it here at the committee. So I want to acknowledge and appreciate these efforts made for our 2 official languages. So that's enough about congratulations and thanks. Mr. Chair, I'm a bit perplexed and surprised that committees decide to send letters to ministers, but I think, and you have more experience than me, but I think it's the first time that we would be sending ministers' letter from a committee that studied an issue before the publication of the report. But the law or rules are made to accept precedents, but I think it's a very major precedent. What we're talking about is not a minor issue. It's a very important issue that we've been discussing for months, and no one here doubts the will of Ms. Posey or all the members in the House to look at this topic seriously and with a balanced approach, because, Mr. Chair, this committee didn't meet just for fun. It had been months that Ms. Posey and others were talking about this, and this committee's been meeting since May, so there were many meetings, actually 9 meetings, and since we're always going beyond the time allowed, that's about 20 hours of evidence. 61 people testified. That's not nothing. And it's false to say that everybody thinks the same way, because we had balanced evidence. Some were for, some were against, some were raised objections, others raised positive points, some were for this approach, but by adding some elements not from about neutrality, but we had to look at things not from the same angle, but different angles. And that's what's called democracy and parliamentary work. We're there to do that. So when I see Ms. Posey's letter, and I know that she's full of, motivated by good ideas, but the reality is that the letter illustrates the vision that Ms. Posey has, and that is shared by the ministerial people. And I don't have any objections to that. We call that democracy. But from that to send a committee letter to ministers, which presume what the report to be published on February 12th will contain, I think that's a bit ambitious, to say it politely. So, Madame Posey, you know me well enough. I'm not wanting to insult you for fun. It's not an insult. It's just a note of caution that I want to bring. If we talked about an issue that just arose out of nowhere and we had to act quickly, I'd understand. But this issue is really full of consequences. It's a serious issue. And that's why we examined it seriously. During 9 meetings, we heard 61 witnesses.
We're so serious, and we have done our homework correctly. We had 9 meetings, almost 20 hours of witnesses, 61 witnesses attending to this committee. That was serious business. So this letter, I have nothing to that. I'm not against letter, but I don't think that in that specific case, it's our job to send a letter to the ministers addressing what we have done as a committee. If some members here feel comfortable with this, fine, go on. But in my personal perspective of that, it's not all the 61 witnesses who agree with this. And some people have other opinions. This is what democracy is all about. This is what parliamentary committee is all about. This is why we have these witnesses and we have these meetings. So I think it's a little bit too early to conclude what will be the report that will be tabled in February. If some members here around the table feel comfortable with this and some other issue, go on. Everybody is ready. Everybody is free to send a letter to a minister. And it's not because we are parliamentarian that we have to be sure that, oh, is that okay? No. As a citizen, For those people, those Canadians who are watching us today, if you want to write to a minister, go on, all the way. But as a committee, Mr. Speaker, I think we have to be more careful with that. So this is why we are not comfortable with this issue, and we will not vote in favor. But if all the members here want to sign it, go on, but sign it as a member of Parliament, not as a committee member. Thank you so much.
Merci, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to echo some of the points of my colleague, Mr. Deltel, as he articulated them extremely well in terms of the work that the analysts have yet to do in terms of compiling over 20 hours of testimony over the course of 9 meetings, much of which I do not see reflected in the specific priority recommendations as outlined in this letter as proposed by my Bloc Quebecois colleague, including alignment with S243. I know we heard a number of witnesses say that that is terrible legislation. So to discount that via a letter on behalf of the Environment Committee, I would find extremely disheartening. I think a report is at least a more thorough overview of all of the pieces of information that have been gathered through this very lengthy study and can provide that balance of 2 or more different views within it, and of course will include recommendations as part of that report. So I, largely for that reason, will not be supporting this motion. I also hope that my name is not on it. I know it hopefully will come as the Environment Committee. I will happily write my own letter to the Environment Minister sharing some of my views on these rather insane ideas that are clearly meant to starve our oil and gas sector. We've heard comments from members of this committee today attacking certain provinces, which is a highlight of the division that has been sown by this current federal government. We've never seen more division across people in this country. We've never seen more division across provinces in this country, and comments like what I've heard today as a reflection of why we should be sending this letter to try to gut control of public sector pension plans and the livelihoods that they will support now and into the future of our retirees on a basis of purely ideological, radical activist viewpoints as reflected by some members of this committee, I do not think is an accurate representation of neither this committee nor of all Canadians, and I will happily be opposing this letter, and should the will of the committee be to send such a letter, I will be individually sending a letter in follow-up disputing the views of this that will more accurately reflect the dual opinions that will emerge undoubtedly from the great work our analysts will do when we do finally in the new year receive the summary of information heard during this study and the recommendations that stem from it. So I will be voting against this motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Ms. Collins.
That's a bit hard to follow up on. Maybe I was going to speak generally to my support of this letter and to the work that Madame Posey has done and to the incredible expert witness testimony that we received throughout the study. But maybe quickly to follow up on Mr. Leslie's comments, this letter does not in any way talk about gutting public pension funds. In fact, I would like to read point 3. Managers of federally regulated public pension funds, in particular the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board and the Public Sector Pension Investment Board, be required to fully disclose their investments in private equity funds. I think it's important that at this table we speak honestly, truthfully, that we are accurate in the information we're providing to citizens. This is a very reasonable letter, and there are things in it that, or there are other pieces that I would like to see in it. There are other pieces that I want to see in the report. I have some pretty deep criticisms of the recent announcement that the government made on the taxonomy, the fact that they're handing the decision-making over to a third party without making a firm commitment that fossil fuels won't be considered under the umbrella of sustainable finance. I would really like to see firm commitments around mandatory disclosures. And I'm glad that in this letter it does talk a bit about transition plans and annual progress reports. There are a number of pieces around the conflict of interest that exists when the same people on fossil fuel, big oil and gas boards sit on the same boards as our big banks. That's not outlined in the letter, but Madame Posey has taken a really reasonable approach to present a letter that I would hope that we can all get behind. And then we'll do the work of digging into the final report. And so, I just want to make sure that when people are listening in, there are people who tune in to our Environment Committee meetings, they know that not all the things that Mr. Leslie just said are accurate, and that I encourage them to look at the motion itself. And I hope that we can listen to the vast majority of the expert testimony that was presented here at committee and urge the government to move forward on sustainable finance and to become a leader. Canada has been falling behind, and so it is urgent that we tackle this issue, and we are facing a climate emergency. We need to take every opportunity to move the needle when it comes to reducing our emissions. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Collins, Madame Posey.
Oui, bon, écoutez.
Yes, well, thank you for all the comments. I took a lot of notes, so I would have other recommendations formulated, but I'll stop here. But in terms of creativity, well, I asked my colleagues at the blog to know is this possible to do this, and I was told yes. So I said, let's go ahead, given that it's something that's super important. We were told by almost all witnesses that Canada was really behind as far as that's concerned. And I thought we're underestimating the impact of the investment of banks in fossil fuel energy on the entire Canadian economy. For the moment, it's Canada. Yes, the analysts have work to do, and in order to respect their work, I thought, yes, February 12th, so let's go to February 12th. But we are the elected representatives. So if the recommendations that will be proposed to us are recommendations we disagree, we can draft a dissent report. But it's up to us, the elected representatives, to take our responsibility. There's all these floods, there's all those deaths, there's health. Everything is affected in our daily life by what's happening in terms of climate change. And the banks are part not of the solution, but the problem at this point. So it's time to do something. And that's why, yes, for me, this motion was very important. And just briefly, I want to say, like Ms. Collins said, point 1 does not say that we have to adopt the senator's bill, but it says to be inspired by this in order to provide a rigorous regulatory framework that's science-based. Is there anyone who's against that, science-based? For the OSFI, well, it's the suggestion by the Environment Commissioner. For point 3, it's mandatory disclosure. I'm saying that as long as we don't disclose anything and data's hidden, people cannot intervene. We need information in order to make sure the actions are relevant, and also talking about a working group. So there's nothing revolutionary to my mind. So could I call the question? On the list, we still have Ms. Taylor-Roy. Have you finished your intervention? Ms. Posey? Yes. So there's Ms. Taylor-Roy who's still on the list.
Very good points brought up and some very interesting points brought up. But I appreciate what Ms. Collins said about us being honest and truthful in what we're saying here. And I realize that sometimes statements are made here or things are said here just for clips and to appeal to certain constituent groups. But I do think calling out people with some of the names that have been used in this committee is inappropriate. It's unparliamentary. And I think those same standards should hold in committee as they do in the House. So I think, notions like radical activist and going on like that. I mean, I realize that this is perhaps good politically for certain members to portray us that way. But I think Madame Posé's letter is very reasonable. The recommendations that she put forward were actually reasonable. Letters have been sent from committee before. And I think in this case especially, given the need for more action more quickly, it's important that we move forward on this. You know, I mentioned that Motion 84 was introduced and there was maximum support from 20 MPs across parties. We know that climate-aligned financial regulation is going to help address the root causes of affordability. And I know that we are all in alignment when we say that we want to take measures to help address affordability. So, you know, right now, climate-related damages already increase the average Canadian household's cost of living by $700 a year. There are households who aren't able to get flood insurance right now and bear the costs of that when tragedy strikes. More and more floods are happening. We know that the increase in food costs, which all of us have been so concerned about and talk about often, we know that one of the major causes of that is actually climate events. And, you know, if you ask any of the experts on this, they will say that, in fact, climate policy and the price on pollution has had a very minimal impact on this, while climate change has had a major impact. So for all of us who are concerned about the costs of living for our constituents and for all Canadians, we should all be wanting to expedite work to ensure that our financial sector is aligned with the real sector when we're talking about our climate goals. And, you know, on the question of, you know, emergency, and is this an emergency? I think the situation right now does qualify as an emergency. But I would also mention that there have been other things that have been brought up in this committee that have been put forward as emergencies, which I certainly would not consider emergencies. In fact, we had a 1064 recently where we ended up doing committee business and coming up with a calendar of our meetings. And that took 4 hours of time when we were all supposed to be in our ridings, meeting with our constituents and actually talking to them about some of these very issues that we are working on in committee. That was not an emergency, yet that was put forward and probably cost taxpayers several $100,000 to bring everybody back, to get it set up, to have the House resources available. And that's in addition to, of course, the filibustering that's been going on in the House. So I think that, you know, this kind of a debate on a motion that Madame Posé is bringing forward is very important. The fact that we are debating whether or not a letter is appropriate, whether or not we should have a excuse me, would you stop shouting at me while I'm speaking, please, Mr. Leslie?
Let's keep.
I didn't
let's not
say
have
anything when you were
heckling.
speaking.
Okay, go ahead. Okay,
Thank you very much, Mr. Leslie.
Madam Ms. Taylor-Roy has the floor. Go ahead, Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Thank you. I sat and listened to Mr. Leslie across the way while he went on and debated this very motion. And I would expect the same respect given to me. You can clip me later and misinterpret what I say all you want, Mr. Leslie, as you're wont to do. But I would hope that you would actually listen to what Ms. Collins said and try and be honest and truthful when you clip people and not put words in their mouths. But I would say that, you know, this is a very important issue. We have this forum coming up for 2 days, as my colleague, Ms. Chattel, said. There are going to be thousands of people here in Ottawa for this. Canadians are concerned. And we were interrupted many, many times in this study that Ms. Posé put forward by Conservative motions, by other things that came up that they deemed to be more important when we had witnesses sitting here. So I don't think it's unreasonable to put forward a letter like this. And I think that, you know, we have a number of reasons. I mentioned affordability as one of them, but there are others. Right? You know, we know right now that our financial institutions fund the main source of climate disruption. And and again, words can be put in my mouth, but I think what we all are interested in here is bringing down pollution from the oil and gas sector, not ending it. We want to see a Canadian economy that's vibrant. We want to see power generated in a way that is sustainable. And we want to see a transition in Canada to those things. And I don't think that means shutting down our energy sector. I think it just means transitioning. And this is what we have to do. The rest of the world is moving in this direction. I know sometimes it's hard for people to leave the past and look forward, especially when they're regressive. But there are there are ways of moving forward and actually transitioning and keeping our economy going, and we've shown that over the last few years. So I think we have to stop clinging to the past and hoping that the climate crisis will go away or that the rest of the world will ignore what we're doing in Canada and start taking action. And I think sending a letter now to the Minister of Environment is one way we can be doing that. Let's move forward. The rest of the recommendations will come. I agree with everything that was said about our clerks. They do an excellent job, and I think that we can have that report done. It will supplement what's always been sent, and we can definitely incorporate much more of the witness testimony that we had. We had some great witnesses come forward, some that were perhaps dabblers or TikTok experts, but we also had some credible witnesses come forward who actually based their comments on science and fact, and I think we need to look at those to see what else we can do. You know, our competitive position is at risk right now. We're jeopardizing it by dragging our feet on major climate-related financial policies. And for anybody who says that they're worried about our economy and moving forward, this should be of great concern. You know, we need to ensure that Canada is not left behind, that investors feel they can continue to invest in Canada knowing that where their money is going is actually going into projects and into companies and funds that are transparent and are telling the truth, or not just telling the truth, but are transparent about what they are doing. So we need this. We need the regulation that will future-proof our economy. And I do feel, Madame Posé, that having a letter go out now, followed by a full report that we can debate as well, is a good way to move forward on this. So once again, thank you for putting this forward. And I would just say there's many reasons, and when it comes to emergencies, I would say the climate crisis is more of an emergency than scheduling meetings. And so I'd hope that you would give it the same urgency that you did to other things. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Madame Chatel.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few minor suggestions. First of all, these recommendations don't bind us when we'll draft the final report. I just want to confirm with Ms. Posé that if during debates, well, I received this recommendation 45 minutes ago. I'm looking at them very carefully. But sustainable finance is a complex issue. Looking at these recommendations, I find them very interesting. I think that it's good to recommend them at this point. And in the final paragraph, we're asking the minister for an answer to tell us what they think of these recommendations. So I'd like to suggest two things. First of all, I'd like to write that we receive a response within 30 days. So this is an amendment in the first paragraph. We're making 4 recommendations, and we're asking the minister to respond. Could you tell us the text of the amendment? So you see in the second to last paragraph, and that the letter asked them to provide a detailed response within 45 days. So a detailed response. So you want to change the 45 to 30. So that's quite simple. So now we need to debate this amendment. But I haven't finished explaining my amendment. So can I go on? Yes. So a response within 30 days would allow us to finalize our report even better. So once the analysts receive the answers from the departments, and to come back to what I said earlier, there are several actions about green finance, what was proposed in October on taxonomy, on disclosure. We had Senator Galvez's bill and these recommendations, and we'll have our report. So I would like there to be a kind of harmonizing of these various recommendations. And I'm taking the opportunity of the drafting of this letter to ask the committee if, first of all, can we change that to 30 days, and that when we get the responses, that our analysts take those into account to in our recommendations. And that's it. And who would like to speak about the proposed amendment? So no one, so we can move to the vote on the amendment.
Mr. Ali?
Hello, can you just repeat that? What are we voting on? Yes.
Okay, we're voting on a very simple change to the motion. At the very end where it says 45 days, we're changing that to 30 days. Or that's the proposal, yeah, okay.
Madame Chatel? Mr. Longfield? Yes. Ms. Taylor-Roy?
Yes.
Mr. Van Couverden? Monsieur Dantel?
No.
Mr. Cram?
Opposed.
Mr. Leslie? No. Mr. Mazur?
No.
Madame Posey?
Oui.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
Okay, so the amendment is adopted, and seeing as there are no other speakers on the list, you want to speak? Yeah, okay, go ahead. Mr. Leslie, on the main motion, yeah.
Just in response to one of my colleagues' comments, I remember, I don't want to misquote you, Ms. Taylor-Roy, but I believe you called farmers coming to protest changes to Bill C-234 tin pod dictators. I'm wondering if you want to comment about some of the name calling previously, particularly towards Canadian farmers.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Okay, now we have a point of order. Mr. Van Couverden.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I think it's important that we maintain a little bit of decorum rather than tossing insults and accusations across the floor at one another. This he said, she said stuff isn't productive and it's unbecoming of this committee.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Okay, now another point of order, Ms. Collins.
I just would like to point out the lack of relevance of Mr. Leslie's comments, and I'm hoping that maybe we could move on without jumping into a debate on this. And I understand that Ms. Taylor-Roy may very much want to respond, but I would just maybe urge to not get into it with Mr. Leslie's comments. It felt, like a lack of decorum in the House. So.
Let's try to stay away from impugning the motives of each other, of members. But okay, Mr. Leslie, do you have more to say, or is it no? Ms. Taylor-Roy. Yeah.
Thank you, and I appreciate the admonition, and I appreciate that that this is not something that should be discussed at this meeting. But this is the very type of thing that Mr. Leslie has brought up and put in social media about me before, and had his trolls then attack me, some threatening and some just misogynistic. So I do feel I should respond, because that was a perfect example. What I was speaking at that meeting was the fact that Mr. Leslie referred to a demonstration that was forming around the flame and that was going to be marching on the Senate where two women who had already been harassed and threatened by Conservative members were sitting. And it reminded me greatly the language that was used by Mr. Leslie when he said they will be marching on the Senate, reminded me of other phrases like that have been used by other people who had tried to disrupt the proper functioning of governments. And I was concerned for the women senators that they would be further harassed and that they'd be further threatened by this. And that is why I referred to that. I at no time indicated that farmers did not have the right to protest. As you very well know, I come from a farming family. In fact, a witness was here the other day who was part of my family. I have worked on farms, and having a Dutch background, of course, my grandfather was a farmer. Many of my cousins, uncles, and aunts are farmers and cousins, and I respect farmers, and I respect their right to protest. What I do not like is hearing that some gathering is being orchestrated by an ex-lobbyist to march on the Senate to threaten senators and tell them what to do. That is not the proper functioning of government, and that was what I was objecting to. So actually, Mr. Leslie, given we've had this conversation now, I would greatly appreciate it if you clip this and post this as well so that your constituents and those trolls that follow me could know what I actually was saying. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing as there are I don't think there are any other speakers on the list, so we will go to a vote on this motion as amended.
Mr. Ali? Madame Chatel?
Oui.
Mr. Longfield?
Yes.
Ms. Taylor-Roy?
Yes.
Mr. Van Couverden? Monsieur Deltel?
No.
Mr. Cram? Opposed. Mr. Leslie?
No.
Mr. Mazur?
Opposed?
Madame Posey?
Oui.
Ms. Collins?
In favor.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
Motion is adopted. We keep going. I have Ms. Collins who asked to be on the list. Sorry, Mr. Van Couverden, did you raise is it a point of order or something?
Just wanted to make sure that I was on the speaking list.
You want to be on the speaking list? Next? Okay, after Ms. Collins? No, the original list, we wiped it out because it was all done in
Monsieur le
camera.
Président, point d'autre quand même.
Point of order. We know that we were supposed to have an in-camera meeting. So why they always say in-camera when there's no camera. But the root camera means a box. So anyway, when we Daguerre brothers invented the daguerreotype, it was a box, so they called it a camera. And that's why we say we're in the box, so nobody can see except for the light. So it's interesting, but so please go ahead, Mr. Deltel. So I know that Ms. Posey had suggested that we could come back to the in camera. Yes, it's delicate because we can't talk about what was said in camera, but we had agreed that it was the thing to think. Ms. Posey, would you want us to come back to in camera?
You said before we left camera, which I can't
You can't,
share.
we can't talk
Well,
about that.
I would just like to say that you clarified your decision about how many votes we would have.
Yeah, we that, so that's right, I did, that's what I'm getting
So
at.
I think that then I'm on the speaking order list. Is that correct?
You could, okay, Mr. Deltella, you're done with, yes, you could make a motion to go back into camera, yes. You're next on the speaking list.
I will be making that motion, but before I do that, I just want to put on notice, so I'm tabling this motion, I'm not moving it. I have a motion on energy poverty, and as folks know, Madame Posey's study is wrapping up, and so the next study on the list is an NDP study. And so I think in a time when we are seeing Canadians across Canada struggling with the cost of living. We also know that buildings are among the top 3 emitters in Canada. It's the oil and gas sector, transportation, and then buildings for heating and cooling that are driving up our emissions. And so I'm going to read out the motion that, pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, the committee undertake a study on energy poverty and home energy efficiency. That this study include a review of defining and measuring energy poverty, barriers to getting to net zero emissions in low-income homes, home retrofits for energy efficiency in existing government programs and policies, tenant rights in relation to access to energy services and affordable housing, the infrastructure gap in Indigenous communities and its hindrance to reaching net zero emissions in homes, that experts and stakeholders be invited to appear, that the Minister of Environment and Climate Change and the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources be invited to appear, and that the study consist of no fewer than 6 meetings, that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House of Commons, and that, pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to the report.
Okay, so you're giving notice?
Just giving notice. I'm hoping that everyone around this table can get on board with studying such an important.
But you have a motion to go back into camera.
And then I will move a motion to go back in camera.
So let's vote on that.
Order, Mr. Chair.
Pardon me? So,
Point of order.
yes, Mr. Van Couverden.
My intervention, I hope to do, it didn't matter if it was in camera or not. I'd like to be first on this.
Yeah,
in
for
order
sure. Okay,
and
yeah, no
back
problem.
in camera.
No problem there.
Mr. Chair,
Well, wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to pause. I have to consult the clerk. This is getting a little complicated. Okay, do we have to go back to the list that? List after Mr. Vancouver, and I'll put you on the list. Because he just asked.
I'd like to ask the clerk for clarity on whether or not the list that is in camera prior to moving out of camera, if in the same meeting you move back
It's at the
in
discretion
camera,
of the chair. It's at the discretion of the
then
chair.
why are you choosing that discretion then?
There's a motion on the table. Let's vote on the motion, and let's just vote on the motion. I mean, I consider that was wiped clean because we didn't know. We still don't know if we're going back in camera. So this is a moot point. So,
This is absurd.
Ms. Collins, we have to vote on your motion. I hope you don't mind. We'll vote on your motion. Are we? Did I gavel? Are we back in here? Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So let's vote.
Mr. Ali, to go back in camera. Madame Chatel.
Oui.
Mr. Longfield.
Yes.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Yes.
Mr. Vancouverton. Monsieur Daltel.
Oui.
Mr. Cram.
In favor?
Mr. Leslie.
Yes.
Mr. Mazer.
Yes.
Madame Posey.
Oui.
Ms. Collins.
in favor.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to be on the list now that we're in camera.
Well, we're not in camera yet, but I'm going to put you on the list.
I'd,
Do you want to gavel and we'll
I'm going to put you on the list
first.
after Mr. Vancouver.
Well, how would he be on the list if we were out of camera for a...